Yeah, I'm delighted to introduce Sarah Lokman. She is a co-founder of Greenomy, based in Brussels, but also operating elsewhere, I believe. And one of the things that Ben mentioned in his remarks was that there's a increase in employment opportunities, job postings related to reporting and impact on the environment. And I think it's fair to say that Sarah and her colleagues are part of that sort of entrepreneurial energy that's seeing that opportunity to help businesses expand their reporting and understand this new framework that's coming into play. So Sarah, we're delighted that you could be with us and give us some insights into what's happening in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Hi, everyone. Sorry for my voice. Normally it's not that sweet to hear, but I hope you hear me very well now. So yeah, as Aaron said, so we created Greenomy 3 years ago, just 3 months after the first report of the TEC about the EU Taxonomy. So we saw the opportunity that it will be a very complex and tough exercise for many stakeholders, from companies to banks to asset managers, insurers, etc. And we were the first ones in Europe to create a platform to vulgarize the EU taxonomy and help the different stakeholders to do their reporting according to the EU taxonomy. So what I'm going to give you now is really the overview of how concretely the EU taxonomy works, and also the challenges that we are facing with non-financial companies, but also in the financial industry, because we are working with small companies, large listed companies, but also with banks and insurers, so insurance companies, etc. So I'll give you the main insights that we gathered for the last 2 years. I'll just share my screen. Can you just confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I'll just put it in the presenter. Okay. So I will just give you a quick overview about the landscape of sustainable finance regulation. So, since the EU Commission has published its Green Deal in order to be carbon neutral by 2050, so Europe will be the first continent carbon neutral. So they have made a list of an action plan in order to achieve this objective, and the main regulation was the EU taxonomy. So we have also other regulations, such as the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, where it gives the companies the guidelines and the requirements how to do their non-financial reporting. So now it's mainly on the sustainability reporting of the companies and the banks that we are talking about now. So the EU Commission is really trying to put the layout, the standardization of the non-financial reporting, because now everyone puts whatever they want in the ESG world, in sustainability, the impact, green, etc. So really the objective of the EU taxonomy, as Ben said, is really to standardize the definition across different companies, etc., in order to be comparable for the investors, the banks, etc. So here there is also the CS3D, which is mainly the regulation that will help the auditors in order to perform a limited assurance on the non-financial reporting. So here it's mainly, so now the companies will do their non-financial reporting, but now the auditors need guidance also on how to check and verify that all the information published and disclosed by the companies are reliable or accurate, correct, etc. Because it's mainly the case now. We have it for the financial reporting, but we didn't for the non-financial reporting, for the sustainability reporting. So that's why the EU Commission came up with this CA3D. And the ESRS, which is the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So it's really the how of disclosing the non-financial reporting. It's mainly for the CSRD, so how the companies can disclose their sustainability information in a specific layout and how it's shared with their different stakeholders, financial partners, etc. So it's a huge work. It's also very progressive work, and it's a live documents, live regulations. So for instance, the EU taxonomy, as Ben said, we have criteria for 2 objectives: climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. And now, we are waiting for the final criteria for the 4 remaining objectives. So it's really a live documents. So the EU taxonomy, and mainly broadly this new EU sustainable finance regulations, came with different challenges. So here, this is really the challenges that are faced by the companies in one side, but also the banks in another side. So first of all is really the lack of sustainability expertise. That's really a huge challenge because it's quite new. EU taxonomy, the CSRD, all these regulations are quite new. So we need more experts on that. Also, there is the cost of implementing the regulation. When we say a new regulation for companies or either the banks, it's mainly more resources, more IT infrastructures that needs to be aligned with the collection of data, the new computations, etc. So it's the IT costs, and as I said, the resource costs, and also the compliance or the non-compliance. What I mean here is, if a company wants to comply with the EU taxonomy, so there is a cost of resources, IT, consulting, etc. But if they decided to not be compliant with the EU taxonomy, for instance, so there are some fines and penalties that will be shared and published in the coming months, if I'm not mistaken, that the companies need to pay in order to just not be compliant with the regulations. And also the main challenges that the companies are facing is really all the requests from their financial partners, from their CFOs, from their chief sustainability officers, because they have the gold or the raw data that the banks needs, that the asset manager needs, etc. So the companies, they have the data, and in the EU taxonomy, so they don't have the right to use proxy data. So they really need to use the raw and the reliable and the correct data directly from the company. So it's really a cost for the companies to implement it. What can I say? Also, the timing mismatch here. What I meant is, so as I said, you see that there are different regulations that are published by the EU Commission, and sometimes there is a mismatch between the timing. So for instance, the banks will require some disclosures from the companies at a certain time that the companies, they don't have to do it, but the banks have to do it, or the asset managers have to do it under another regulation, which is this SFDR. So there is this mismatch that put more pressure on the companies to do something that they don't have to do now, to start collecting data, doing reporting, computations, etc. And then the banks, they have the pressure also because they need to report and they need to be compliant. So sometimes there is this lack of collaboration between the different policymakers, as I've shared with in the breaking room with Anna and Oema. So here I will just give you from what we experienced with the implementation of the EU taxonomy within the companies and the banks, mainly the banks. It's really, first of all, is to understand the EU taxonomy. It's quite complex, it's quite new, so the businesses need to understand what they have to do, and also if they are, for instance, in the scope of this CSRD or the NFRD, which is another the old version of the CSRD. So there are many new new items, new requirements that the companies and the banks have to understand and to be acquainted with. Then you have assessing their own activities, which means that for these 6 environmental objectives, but now we have only criteria for these 2. We have a list of activities that the TEG have said that this is the activities that are in the scope of the EU taxonomy. So for instance, if you are in construction of new buildings, if this is your economic activity, so you are in the scope of the EU taxonomy, and then you are obliged to do your alignment with the EU taxonomy and do the full assessment, which means be compliant with the different criteria that are linked to, for instance, this economic activity. Then, it's sustainability reporting. So as I said, the companies now are more and more obliged or under the pressure to disclose their non-financial data with their stakeholders, with their shareholders, with their financial partners. Then improving sustainability. For us, when we pitch the EU taxonomy for the companies in order to make them aware of that they have to do it, it's an obligation. And apart from the obligation of the reporting is really to improve their sustainability. So for instance, today or this year, you are 20% aligned with the EU taxonomy, but you need to, I don't know, you want to reach 30% in 5 years. They need to know what are the different steps to do in order to achieve their sustainability goals. It's constantly improving. And as I said in the beginning, the EU taxonomy, it's a live document. So the criteria and the thresholds that are published in the delegated acts, so the criteria will be updated every 3 years. So it's constant improvements. The last point for implementing the taxonomy is also to engage with the investors. So the investors, they really want to shift, to participate to the shift of the economy to more greener, fair, ethical economy. And to do so, they need to trust the data, they need to trust the companies where they are investing in. And in order to do that, they need to compare the different companies and to compare apples to apples. That's why the taxonomy alignment score is really a great KPI to or information or score to have for the investors to know where to invest their money. And then for the usability of the EU taxonomy. So the platform of sustainable finance, they have shared their recommendations to the EU Commission, about the usability and data of the EU taxonomy. So there were many challenges that they have raised, and I will share the link into the resources section in Miro. It's really quite important and interesting to read, because we are facing it on a daily basis with our company, with our clients. So for instance, you tell them this is the criteria, but then they say, but I need to, who I need to talk to, who is the stakeholder in my company I need to collect the data from. Or for instance, if I want to compute the scope 1, what are the sub-data or sub-data points that I need in order to compute this criteria and be compliant with the EU taxonomy? And yeah, another point is really to make sure that the data is available for the financial institutions. Because as I said, the quite challenging for the financial institutions is to get the data from the companies, because there are no estimation or proxy data to use. So in order to create new products that are really aligned with the EU taxonomy criteria, etc., so they need reliable and accurate data from the companies. Another thing is also I would say the regulatory and data gaps, which means that we have so many disclosures to do. So for the EU taxonomy, now the CSRDS for next year, the SFDR, under the CSRD you have the ESRS information. So for a company, they need to know which data they need to collect in order to disclose and be compliant with the sustainable finance requirements. So now there are many data gaps. For instance, in the CSRD, you have the double materiality assessment, which means that for a company, how they are affecting the environmental and the social part, but also how they are affected by the climate risks, etc. So they don't know now how to do their double materiality assessment, or they are requested to have the materiality assessment of their suppliers. So if you have a supplier in the US that have no clue of what's going on at the EU, and you are obliging them to do that, so it's quite really intensive exercise for the companies. So there are many challenges that the usability of the EU taxonomy and also the interpretation sometimes that could lead to the greenwashing, the case that we had in the US, also in Germany. So there were some funds that were labeled as Article 9, which means that they are the companies in this fund are aligned with the EU taxonomy criteria, but when you dig in, you don't find them that they are aligned. So that can lead to some greenwashing. But I believe, and this is my honest opinion, is really the objective of the EU taxonomy is really to avoid the greenwashing, and to do so, I think that the actual platform of sustainable finance, different groups, they have, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but most of their work now is on data, on usability, and how really to implement and help the different stakeholders to implement the EU taxonomy. I will just finish by this map, just to give you an idea about that now the most advanced taxonomy or green taxonomy is the European one. And there are many countries that are looking at the EU Commission and taking the EU taxonomy, as the blueprint, and trying to adapt it to their local situation. So, for instance, the UK is looking at the EU taxonomy and I think that 80% of the UK taxonomy is mainly taken from the EU one, the Singapore one. You have also the South Africa. So we have some clients in South Africa, because their taxonomy is quite similar to the EU one. So there are more and more taxonomies that are popping up in the different countries, and here the objective or the priority will be really this collaboration between the different policymakers, first at the EU and then globally, in order to create this interoperability between the different countries, to make it easier for the banks, for the companies that they are in different countries, in order to collect the necessary data that will answer the different disclosures from different policymakers, from different regulations.